Welcome to Unexpected Points. I am your host, Kevin Cole. My guest today from ESPN, from the worldwide leader, is Seth Walder, sports analytics writer, also a known Aaron Donald hater, along with all of the analytics group over at ESPN. Went as far as to invent a metric just so they could hate on him. So I appreciate you being here, Seth, and doing that, because it really helps boost our standing in the community.
It is generally advisable that, first what you do is you pick a player you want to target, figure out how you can trash them, and then just build something around it. That's sort of our motto. So it's a good idea for any aspiring analytics folks out there.
Right. And if you want the highest level of buy-in, you choose Aaron Donald for that player also.
Yes.
That's how you bring the skeptics in.
It's ironic because I know we're going to talk about this later. It's ironic because that was our big selling point when we did the pass rush metrics, was look how off the charts good Aaron Donald is. And then that really works very well. So to go the opposite route is harder.
Yeah. I'll just a little preview. Yeah, we will talk about this a bit later. I know we at PFF had some fun at your expense, sending out a few metrics there. But I'll say here, not publicly on Twitter, I'll say here that I kind of agree with you guys on this here. And I think obviously those things get blown out of proportion. First, it's Aaron Donald has a low has a low rate here. Then it becomes, Aaron Donald is bad. Then it becomes Aaron Donald should not be in the NFL. Then it becomes all these other things. So we'll get to all of that miscasting and straw manning that's going on with your metric. But the first thing I want to discuss with you is what we saw in week one. Now, I think it's important for everyone says don't read too much into week one, but I think there are certain things you can read into and certain things you probably have to ignore. So I have a list of topics which I think are interesting that I think people are going to be talking about this week, and I want to give you the opportunity, and then I'll join in here, whether you're buying these trends, these narratives coming out, you're selling it, or you're kind of 50-50, maybe not, you're just holding them after week one. Does that sound good?
Sure. All
right, so let's jump into the first one here. Which is probably a mistake on my part. This offseason, I mentioned, although I caveated it big time, that Russell Wilson could be, at this moment, slightly overrated. That was my exact quote. Now, that just means Russell Wilson is overrated when you say something like that. Now, he came out week one. He had, in a lot of people's minds, I think, the best week of week one, if not Aaron Rodgers. And most importantly, they let him cook a little bit there. Maybe Seahawks Twitter effectively shamed Pete Carroll and Schottenheimer into letting him cook here. So I ask you, are we buying the fact that Russell Wilson not only will play at this level, which I think is something that a lot of people will buy into, but will he continue cooking when they're not playing the Falcons defense?
So firstly, I just what I heard was you said Russell Wilson's average. Is that what I heard?
Bad, actually, just bad.
Just bad. Okay, good. I think the hardest part of the question is, will they let him keep cooking? Because that's just like trying to get into Pete Carroll and Brian Schottenheimer's head. And I think we've all tried to do that for several years and figure out what the heck they're thinking and haven't really solved them yet. It's obviously encouraging that they're letting him pass. They're passing more on early downs. That's great. I've always felt like the notion that Russell Wilson, you were going to get significantly diminishing returns on his pass game. I just didn't see why that was the assumption. Why anyone should assume that, because he's a top 3 quarterback in the league. I think that's pretty indisputable. And in general, the best thing to do is to take your best players and utilize them more. Take your best techniques or your best parts of your game and utilize them more. So for me, if they are letting Russ, have a chance to cook a little bit, I think it's going to work out great for them. I mean, to me, this is one of those things that, like you mentioned, you don't want to overreact to week one, but there's some things that might actually change the way you view a team. And Seattle was a team that I thought probably outperformed their abilities a little bit last year when it came to their record. And I think that with Wilson, if he's allowed to pass this much, it actually changes the way that I view Seattle offensively. So, yeah, I mean, I think that I guess I'm buying the notion that Russ cooking makes the Seahawks a much better team in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I have to lock in on my previous take. Like, I can't let it go. So I'm gonna look through everything through that sort of lens. I think when it comes to NFL coaching, what we see generally is if it ain't broke type of mentality here. So it worked, right? So they'll continue to do it. Now, if it doesn't work in another game, if Russell Wilson has a poor game on high volume, which honestly has happened a lot. I'm not saying that he's bad at high volume. It's just it could just be random. But some of the lowest efficiency seasons he had were back in like 2015, where he had to pass it, a lot in 2016 in those years. So if that continues to happen, I think there could be. The coaches could go the other way. It's like a lot of coaches will go for two a lot, and it's because they were successful a few times at the beginning of the season. We saw Mike Tomlin doing this a few years ago, where they couldn't make an extra point, so they started going for two, and then they started going for two all the time. Situations like that. So I think that is part of it. But again, I want to say something about Russell Wilson and his ratedness, whether over or under, and I'm going to bring ESPN into it this time. I'm bringing you guys into it because I looked up the QBR, the prime metric from ESPN, a EPA based metric based on analytics, and Russell Wilson for week 1 so far this year, not number 1, not number 2, not number 3, number 4. Behind Mahomes at number 3, who most people don't think that had that great of a game. Rodgers at number 2, and then Jackson at number 1. So how do you defend yourself, ESPN, saying you're saying Russell Wilson is not one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the NFL is what I'm reading.
Well, it's right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, QBR is a rate metric. So ultimately the key with Wilson has always been that you just want more. And so if you're getting more of the 4th best, most efficient quarterback, even if he were to maintain that level, that would undoubtedly be a good thing for Seattle.
Yeah, and one small thing to point out at Wilson, there was some buzz about the fact that he had completed, I forget what it was, 10, 11, 12 passes in a row at a certain point. So I do think the way that we look at Russell Wilson, and this is also a problem with our grading system a little bit, is that the public understates the negative of taking a sack. And our grading system does to a degree also. We don't assign negative grades to sacks in the majority of cases, when in reality, part of it is on the quarterback, not all the time, but a lot of the time. So, in that time period, Wilson took 3 sacks. Amazingly, he still completed one drive where he took an 8-yard sack and a 9-yard sack, and they still got a touchdown out of it. But that's something where if you compare him to others like Mahomes, not Rodgers so much, because Rodgers takes a lot of sacks, and Lamar Jackson, those guys don't take as many sacks. So I think that's something that doesn't play into it. And I'm looking here at the QBR. He had a negative 1.5 EPA on sacks. No one else had higher than a negative 0.5. So I think that was partially a differentiator with Wilson also.
That's definitely true. And also, with Wilson, always the thing has been too, like it's not just the sacks, like he actually invites pressure on himself a lot of the times, which is fine. Like it's not a problem when you're Russell Wilson because he's so good at that kind of like magic improvisation that he can make special plays out of it. But that pressure, which has often been probably over-attributed to Seattle offensive lines over the years, is sometimes on Wilson. I think that I agree with you on that point. I think a part that maybe like traditional stats or completion percentage and all that will underrate about Seattle is just like the depth of targets on their throws. Like I think about the thing I talk about with Tyler Lockett all the time is like his catch rate, especially 2 years ago when he had basically a Michael Thomas catch rate twice as far downfield. And we don't talk about incompletions as much as we talk about completions. And the reality is that the Seattle offense having so few, being efficient while still attacking downfield, efficient in terms of like completion percentage, is what separates them from a lot of other teams.
Yeah. So again, one other thing that I want to say, you guys have the completion percentage over expectation. That you've been working with that number. Ben Baldwin, of course, has been pumping it out there primarily because it shows Russell Wilson being better than everyone else, and he's a Seahawks homer. But one other thing that I'll say about that, which I think is interesting, and I don't know if this is an overrated or underrated type of thing on Russell Wilson, is the fact that he completes these extremely difficult passes, downfield passes, but he doesn't get much run after the catch from his receivers. Now, part of that may be his receivers, part of that may be the scheme, but I also think part of it is he doesn't really have a quick passing in rhythm type of passing game. And that's where you get a lot of yak from. So I think that's something where I don't really know. I think in the past, people may have underrated him because he didn't do that. But now when you're looking at measures like completion percentage over expected, he's getting these enormous numbers, but it doesn't necessarily carry through in the EPA numbers because he's not getting the yak. There's not as much yak in there. So he's completing these deep, long passes, but quite often, it wasn't the case for DK Metcalf on Sunday because he was hit exactly in stride. But quite often, the guys, you get tackled after that and you don't get a lot of yak. So I also wanted to bring that up again in my continued quest to say he may be overrated.
Yeah, no, I hadn't heard that one before, and that's a good point, actually. I mean, I'm trying to look up Seattle's yak over expected to see if, but I think that is an interesting point in the sense that, yeah, you're right. Like even the variant on CPOE, like Kaio, like completed air yards over expectation, is taking away that yak number. And yeah, it looks like Seattle's expected yak is on. No, actually, that's interesting. In 2019, their expected yak, this is per Next Gen Stats, was just about league average. So that actually runs slightly counter to what you were just saying. But
so you're saying yak versus expectation, or how much they're expected to get on a particular throw?
How much yak they're expected to get on a particular throw. Oh, right. Okay. So you're saying, right. So like what I'm saying is, so I'm saying not versus expectation, what the actual expectation is. So I think like I'm not, I don't know. I have to think about it more, but like to your theory, we would expect their expected yak to be low if Wilson's not putting them in positions to get yak.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to figure out this disconnect because, for instance, he was, if you look at him and from an EPA basis, he wasn't nearly as high like last year as his grades were and his completion percentage over expectations. So I'm just trying to think of different ways and why that may be the case.
Sacks is a huge part of that. I mean, that's like unquestionably sacks would be a huge part of that. And that's like a big reason, why you have this huge disconnect with Mahomes between his CPOE and his EPA. He doesn't take sacks.
Okay. Well, okay. I'm going to move on to the second topic here. So I guess we're buying on that one. So this is kind of bringing two guys together who people like to compare, although one is kind of accomplished and the other one isn't. Cam Newton and Josh Allen. Now, both of them had big week ones. Both of them were used a ton in the running game. Both of them are being seen as, they're competitors here in this NFC East. But I think kind of the people probably elevated both teams in their minds after what happened in week one. So are you individually for these different guys? Are you buying the fact that they're kind of taking these teams to the next level this year?
Taking your teams to the next level? I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, versus what your expectation would have been.
Yeah. I think I'm not buying Josh Allen he did have a good game in week one. I don't want to take away from that. The two fumbles hurts quite a bit. Fumbles tends to be a problem for him. That hurts quite a bit in general. So that's an important part if you're going to be, a running quarterback. I'm not sure, after last season when he wasn't particularly good, one game against the Jets, who I think we're probably going to talk about them. I think very, very little of. It does not make me think that Josh Allen is trending up. It doesn't mean the Bills can't be good because the rest of that team is so talented that you're kind of like – it's like that thing. If you have a below-average quarterback but you hit it just right everywhere else, you can still be a really good team, and the Bills are set up perfectly to pull that off again. But, no, I don't think there's like – I haven't seen a reason in there to expect Josh Allen to be great or to be substantially improved. What the Patriots are doing is like far more interesting. That has me wondering. I guess I'm going to fall somewhere in the middle here. I mean, what they did running with Cam Newton, and if you didn't watch, for folks that didn't watch the game, this wasn't scrambles, right? These were, I mean, some of them were read plays, but it was a lot of Cam Newton runs, design runs or read plays, and they did a great job of putting him in situations where he was running against light boxes. So if you're going to have a running offense like that, is so critical to run against light boxes, because the margins are just smaller in the run game. You have to just be consistently successful more. And I think with the Patriots, and they ran 65% of the time in week one. So that is by far the most of any team in week one. I'm fascinated. Like, can they pull this off? I don't know that we have enough from week one to tell, but I think that if you knew you were going in that direction with this kind of like rushing attack, I think probably like maximizing Cam Newton's strengths, like let's, instead of trying to force him into being something he's not, like let him play to his strengths and utilize the ground game. The way they did it against the light boxes, to me, was an encouraging sign.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think both guys probably ran more. I mean, they ran as much as you would like, because you like to see both of them run, but it was a lot for both of them. I mean, both had 15 carries. I think Cam was something like 35% of the carries for the Patriots. Allen was 40%, where those numbers, typically don't get over 20% unless you're someone like Lamar Jackson. And Cam didn't throw the ball that much. I mean, at least Allen did throw the ball 40-something times. So the amount of times that he ran, while high on a nominal basis, on a relative basis, wasn't nearly as high. So I think there's kind of like an encouraging side to both of those things, especially for Cam, because you just didn't know if he was going to run or not based upon the injury history. But there's also a discouraging side in that these are unsustainable numbers. And especially with Allen, we saw the turnovers. Maybe I'm wrong in this, but just from my very unanalytical eye test, is that he kind of looks like he's going to get himself hurt eventually on some of these plays. He did as a rookie. He missed some time. McCam has obviously been hurt too, but I think he has maybe a little bit more awareness there. So for that reason, I'm a little bit, hold-ish on them. Did it change your opinion on who is going to win this division, or who FBI thinks is going to win this division? Most analytic systems I've seen have favored the Bills versus Vegas. So Vegas almost all offseason has seen this as being close to a tie as far as what their odds will be. Most systems favor the Bills. Do you have any insight into that or opinion on judging the two of them for that title, for the AFC East title?
So FPI in the preseason is heavily betting market based. So it's not going to diverge a ton. Right now it has the Bills 50%, Patriots 43%. So still pretty close.
Yeah.
I think to me, the liability at quarterback, I sort of treat Newton as more of an unknown, whereas I feel more confident in Allen being liability at quarterback has, shaded my opinion to be more toward the Patriots heading into the season. I will say, can you remind me, I think Josh Allen, I thought there was some, maybe this was just coach speak about not having him run as much in the preseason. I feel like
he said that.
He said that. Like, to me, if you're a Bills fan, I think the encouraging thing is that he did run, because that's the one thing that really works for him. So I feel like you don't want to get into this sort of Trubisky situation where you're really successful running and then you try and be something that you're not, and you take away that really good part of your game.
Yeah, and then they were, as you mentioned, design runs too. I think for Trubisky had this thing where he had some design runs. He was scrambling much more often in the 2018 season, where he showed some promise, and then that dialed back. And the scrambles are just more, more variable, more fluky, depending upon the particular game, what'll end up happening. So yeah, Allen did talk about running less. I think all these guys say they want to run less just because, it's not being a quarterback, or it's not going to be valued in the same sort of way. So I'll just put that in as part of it. And again, I'll just say from an EPA type of metric, Allen, he didn't have the greatest game because of those fumbles. And, that might be something that's fluky, but, I'm looking again, I'll pin this on ESPN here, 14th in QBR, below Drew Brees. Drew Brees literally can't throw the ball. So and below Drew Brees. And again, fumbles. And then from our metrics, we initially had him for 2 turnover-worthy plays where he almost got intercepted in the end zone. We brought that back to 1. So I think with Allen, it's one of these things where, there's some upside, but there's clearly, like, if you're not playing the Jets, if you fumble twice, if you miss 2 wide open guys in the end zone, and if you almost throw 2 interceptions, that's going to be difficult against an upper tier competition.
And if those 2 fumbles were picks, like, what would the general conversation around Allen's day have been? It wouldn't have been the same thing. And yet, turnovers are turnovers either way. So I think underrating fumbles is or fumbles should not be underrated, I guess I should say.
Yeah, I mean, there's randomness to fumbles. If you watch one of them that he took, he was like doing a flip over some guy. Like, I don't know what he was. He was like jumping over someone for no reason. So yeah, some of them can be pretty random. With Allen, I don't know if they're quite as random as others.
He had 14 last year, if I recall. So
yeah,
it's a hefty number.
Yeah, there's a history there. Okay, so the next one we're going on to here is the 49ers, the quote unquote Super Bowl hangover. They lose week 1 to the Arizona Cardinals, division rival. The Seahawks looked, fantastic there. Are they in trouble, not only as far as their Super Bowl path, but maybe even within the NFC West? Are you buying the fact that the 49ers are in trouble after week 1?
I think I am, because of the division, in the sense that I mentioned to you already that one team that changed my outlook on them was the Seahawks, and the other that did that is the Rams. So in that sense, I think the 49ers are just in a tougher spot. And I was a little bit, I'm sort of coming in from it as not thinking about them in the preseason as necessarily a top 3 team. Sort of the standard, you expect defensive regression, but I don't know, like, from the 49ers game, if I have like a strong take one way or another on say that offense. I mean, sort of like, qualitatively, you think of a Kyle Shanahan offense as being able to provide some sort of floor, though, maybe that would have been a high floor. I mean, maybe that would have been what people would have said about McVay a year ago. I did watch like the Garoppolo sacks, and he definitely missed some. 2 of them he had like open guys downfield. The third one he had an open check down that he missed. So I'm not sure I have like a strong feeling on them either way. The one thing I will say is that when DeAndre Hopkins went off, at first I was like, okay, well, that's super interesting. Then I noticed he was playing way more on the left side. And I was like, oh, okay, stay away from Sherman. But then Sherman actually did travel some of the time. Most of it was a minority of Hopkins' snaps that Sherman lined up against him, but he did travel more than Sherman normally does. And then I looked at actually the plays where Sherman defended him, and that was not Hopkins' most productive. 2 of 3 and the 2 completions were 2 out routes. So to me, that's like maybe the encouraging sign is Richard Sherman was really good last year. And if you're the 49ers, you probably need Sherman to be that again. It's not encouraging when DeAndre Hopkins roasts you, but still, like, you want to have that older star cornerback show something.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a weird game. I didn't watch a ton of it, but I mean, you had some themes coming into it. One, 49ers didn't have anyone to throw the ball to, and then Kittle kind of messes up his knee. Deebo Samuel, now they're saying not only is he going to IR, which could be a minimum of 3 games, but he's going to they said he had a quote unquote setback is what I heard on his foot. So that's a bit concerning. The rookie didn't play. Brandon Ayuk didn't play. A little bit underplayed angle here is the loss of Emmanuel Sanders, who, when he came in midway through last season, whether it's noise or timing or not, Garoppolo his numbers took a big step up. There was a big kind of on-off split on the season without Sanders last year. So you combine all that together. I think there are some issues beyond this game and what will end up happening there. Now, within the game itself, there were some fluky plays for the Cardinals. They had a 22-yard scramble touchdown from Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray had 13 EPA on scrambles in one game. No one else had more than 3 for week 1. So, that was just a huge, huge amount. And like I said, the scrambles can be a little bit all over the place. Kyler his time to throw was one of the lowest. Is 2.2 seconds, which helped neutralize that pass rush. They didn't really get much pressure on him, and I thought that it was actually a great job by Kyler, who threw a lot of short passes last year too. So maybe it wasn't like such a, and they did okay against the 49ers, I think, last year too. So maybe it wasn't like a master game plan, but more of just a matchup between the two. And then, that touchdown to DeAndre Hopkins was kind of a blown, well, it wasn't a touchdown, sorry, down to the 1 yard line with DeAndre. It was kind of a blown coverage. So maybe that's a little bit fluky. But then again, on the other side, you got a 65-yard touchdown to your running back.
Right.
For the 49ers. So yeah, I think they are in trouble, but I don't think it was a good matchup for them.
Mm-hmm. I think that's fair. I think the Sanders point is a good one. I didn't think about it as much as I think that's the thing is like Emmanuel Sanders is sort of perennially underrated, and even still, like, even though I've previously thought that, like, didn't think about it, his loss as much as it probably should have.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of thought of it as a total afterthought for the Saints offense, and I think I'm not sure if he had more targets than Kamara, but he definitely was utilized more than Mike Thomas was in Week 1. So that was an interesting development. All right, we talked about the Jets a little bit here. No one likes to talk about losers, but I want to talk about them in the context of number one pick. Are they looking like they're going to be the number one pick? And maybe will it be Trevor Lawrence in New York? Should Jet fans already flip to after Week 1? Should they already flip to Trevor Lawrence watch?
Like, okay, when people say don't overreact to Week 1, like, this was my take going into the season. So I'm not overreacting to Week 1. I don't understand what could possibly cause the Jets to be good. Like, I like, what is the answer? Like, the answer is Sam Darnold takes some insane step up. The last time Sam Darnold was top 20 in QBR, NFL or college, was 2016. So that's a long time ago. And I know he's in a terrible situation. Like, he actually is, but you would think that a good quarterback would elevate that to some degree. I don't see how. I'm like totally flummoxed. Like, what's the good part of this team? Their run stuffing? That doesn't get you. It doesn't really get you very far. And I just can't. I'm flummoxed. I've just been staring at this team for months, trying to figure out what possible reason for optimism is there. And so, yes, I think they are in the race for the number one pick. I think they're like, that would probably be good for them, because I think the worst case scenario is they play relatively poorly this season, and maybe they make a change of head coach and then think, well, now we got to give Darnold another year with the new head coach. I mean, after this season, if Darnold hasn't played well, you've got a pretty strong sample size of saying, hey, I think this guy's telling you what he is. And so then they might waste another year. And that's like really kind of the problem scenario for the Jets. I think, yeah, if they end up bottoming out, that could end up being a good thing for them. Yeah, if they land a Trevor Lawrence, a Justin Fields, something like that, that could be great. So, yeah, I mean, you tell me, is like, what's the case for this team being good? Because I have not found it.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, we did a little survey amongst PFF analysts, and I did choose them for the number one pick. A little bit spicy, but a little bit of spice there. But yeah, what has Darnold done to say that he's going to be better than Gardner Minshew, right? I mean, I looked into, when I was looking at Darnold and at Allen, everyone points to this third year as being the make or break year. And I think it is from the perspective of fans. I mean, sometimes quarterbacks may make it to the fourth year, but the reality is, even after 2 years, you got to at least be, if you're in position to draft someone, they really weren't this last year, you got to really at least be thinking about it, because there's only a couple of quarterbacks who have turned their careers around, one of them being Troy Aikman, into being a really high level quarterback. And he was in a god-awful situation, 0-16 his first year when he came into the league. So somewhat similar. So I think there is, if they can get guys healthy, I don't know if someone like Denzel Mims can contribute, but if they can get him out there, if they get Perryman healthy, I think Perryman can be better than what we saw on Sunday. And I guess your hope is that this was just a tough defense, a really great defense that they played week 1. But some of the internals in here, he had a 40% pressure rate in that game, which is about the same as he had last year. He took sacks. They only ran play action 8% of the time, which was, I think, it was the lowest of the week. Although in their defense, they were down so much, no one would have bought it. No one would
Right.
have bought the fakes. But again, that's just not something that Gase necessarily does. He doesn't necessarily make life easier for his quarterback. So that's the main reason of disappointment. Is just it was almost like if you would have scripted what was going to happen in the most likely scenario, not even in the most negative scenario, it's kind of exactly what we got on Sunday.
You brought up the pressure on Darnold, and actually I watched a bunch of his plays, and I'm not sure he. Normally, my take on Darnold is that he holds the ball way too long, invites the pressure. Last year, he was under fire a lot, and like if you look at our pressure numbers, which are hand tracked, he was pressured at a super high rate. But if you look at our pass block win rate metrics, the Jets came out middle of the pack. So what that tells me, along with a super high time to throw, is that it's on either Darnold, or you could make a case for the scheme or the receivers. But like bottom line is, that pressure is being invited on him, and that's a bad sign. That's a problem. I did watch like all of our pressure plays for Darnold this week, and I don't think he he missed a couple of guys, but like downfield. But I didn't really feel like he invited that pressure in this case this week, though I do think that's true broadly for him.
Yeah, and I mean Darnold's not unathletic,
Mm-hmm.
so I would have hoped to have what people don't talk about him. Well, like why isn't he doing anything with his legs or on the ground? But I do think that he might be below whatever the threshold is for someone who can really harness that skill. And in today's NFL, I mean, if we see the guys who are very successful, the young guys, even Patrick Mahomes, they can run to a degree. I mean, Mahomes is probably on a different level from even some of the top quarterbacks as far as his ability to do the passing. I think we have too much of this archetype in our head of the Tom Brady, Phillip Rivers, Ben Roethlisberger to a degree, guys who can really just do everything out of the pocket and work like that. And that's just not how it works now. And we're seeing with Darnold, and I think also this is something I'm kind of starting to lean into on a take on Baker, is they just don't. Baker just doesn't have the functional athleticism to make up for the problems that he has. When he tries to bail out of the pocket, he's not able to do it. And I think for Darnold, it may be somewhat the same degree. Like he could be better than Josh Allen, but Josh Allen can get out of some stuff when he's running around out there, where Darnold can't. And again, that just means he really has to be that much better in the passing game, which is difficult to do.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I'm just continually. I'm sorry to like. The Jets, it's a very hopeless situation for them. It really is.
Well, I think the fans have given up in New York, so that's okay. It's not like some of these other fan
September
bases.
15th? Perfect, yeah.
All right, let's move on to, you mentioned the Rams earlier, and I think the Rams are really interesting. I was picking them as, like, why is no one talking about the chance of the Rams winning the division when they would have been a playoff team last year in this year's format? They would have, who knows? And if they would have won a game, everyone could be talking about them like they talk about the Tennessee Titans or someone like that this year. So are you buying the Rams rebirth now after an impressive win where they look pretty good on both sides of the ball? I mean, they didn't dominate, obviously, but they look pretty good on both sides of the ball against a Cowboys team that a lot of people are very high on this year.
This is a full buy for me. So, yeah, I'm really high on the Cowboys. I picked them to win the Super Bowl, so it doesn't get much higher than that. And I did pick the Rams to win the division, so, maybe I'm just confirming our priors here. But there were three things.
Put some money on that, too.
There were three things I saw in this Rams game. And like you said, they were good, but they weren't. Their offense wasn't crazy efficient or anything like that. But there were three things I saw that, actually – I thought were very encouraging signs. So first things first, they used a ton of motion at the snap. So we did a story last year on the Ravens and how much motion at the snap they were using. And that was sort of the key, if you put a man in motion and then he stops, there's a beat and then you run the play. We found not much of an edge when you do that, but it's actually when you have the man sort of in motion, sprinting across, that actually helps your offense by a decent chunk. They had motion at the snap 34% of the time, which is really high rate. It was number one this week. It was about double the rate they did last year, which they were already one of the higher teams. So to me, that's a really good sign. If they are going to start implementing that more in their offense, that's just like, we talk about play actions, just like free money, basically, you're taking. Play action is the second thing. So they ran more play action than they did last year. I think they had the second highest play action rate this week. So more play action is better, right? Like there probably is an upper limit of how much play action you can use, but we haven't found it yet. So I wouldn't, if I were a coach, I wouldn't be sweating it. And then the third thing was their offensive line. So like back 2 years ago when they reached the Super Bowl, they had the number one pass blocking line in the regular season that year. Dropped all the way down to 22nd last season. And I think that was just a big factor for them. They were, I think, 8th this week against the Cowboys team that I guess it's a little hard to tell. They were an excellent pass rushing team by our win rate metrics last year, but they had Robert Quinn, who's like the pass rush win rate god, and Malik Collins, who we kind of liked as well. Those guys are both gone. DeMarcus Lawrence is still there. It likes him quite a bit too. So quite a bit as well. So TBD on how difficult it is to stop the Cowboys pass rush. But to me, that's a really important thing. All three of those things is about making Jared Goff's life easier. And I think that's really good signs. So that's the Rams are like I said about the Seahawks. There's another team where you kind of change your outlook a little bit. I'm more bullish on them than I was before. I'm more bullish on them than FPI.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it sounds like you're reading from some of my notes here, other than looking at different metrics. Because, yeah, I mean, the blocking was the thing that, I mean, Goff was under a lot of pressure last year. He had a very low touchdown rate. They just weren't able to get the plays that they needed to. Now, how much of that was luck or not, we don't know. But yeah, I mean, just to solidify what you were talking about with their pass blocking. Yeah, we had the unit at the 4th best pass blocking grade this last week, whereas last year for the full season they were the 4th worst. His pressure rate was 20%, and they invite some pressure with the play action game and things like that. So that's a pretty low number based upon what they do. Whereas 35% a year ago, you got the ball out quicker, 2.3 seconds versus 2.6 seconds, using a lot more screens that they were not, for some reason, were not using last year, and they were involving the running backs in the passing game a lot more. They threw about 20% of their targets to running backs versus only 11-12, which was near the bottom of the league the year before. So, which also brought down the ADOT, but I think that's okay when if you know the offensive line, that first things first, which is don't put Goff under pressure and don't have those mistakes. And I think they did that. So yeah, for those reasons, everything is good. The one question mark again is what you mentioned. We just don't know on the Cowboys defense whether or not this is going to become a week by week thing that teams are able to bring pressure down. So that would be the one hedge I would have. But I think I agree with you on the Rams. And how you framed everything with them being a little bit more positive now.
Plus, big upgrade at running back, so that should.
What are we talking about? So
doesn't matter. I'm not there.
Yeah. That's why you got to draft one in the 2nd round after drafting one, trading up in the 3rd round the year before to draft a guy you don't use. You just keep on doing it. Keep on doing it. Why not? Okay, so another team that had an expected blowout week 1 win was the Ravens. I'm interested in Lamar Jackson because I think, again, number 1 in QBR. You saw he was number 1 in QBR there. But I'll say one thing about QBR, which was interesting when you go through there, because it breaks out their EPA by category. For the run, negative 0.6. He did not add any value. In fact, he lost some value running the ball in this game, yet number 1 in QBR for the week. Do you think he is really taking that step to the next level? Not a Josh Allen step to wherever Allen's going, but a Lamar Jackson step into kind of that elite passer in addition to what he can do on the run, whereas people were expecting regression from what he had done last year passing the ball.
So I think this is one where it's trickier. So like with the Rams, right? Those are what we talked about were 3 things that like 3 sort of like changes to features of their offense. Like that feels like something that you can change the way you view down the line. Like I watched, you see what Jackson did and it was super impressive. But it's hard to change a view on a player, I think, from one game. That being said, it did look really good. And then I think that the part that makes me slightly more bullish is I don't know how you feel, but like I was pretty high on the Browns defense going in. I think Denzel Ward is really good. You got to deal with Myles Garrett coming at you. So I think the way they were able to handle that defense, it's possible that 5 weeks from now we're looking back at at that and realizing how much more impressive this week one game was. But I could be wrong there. I mean, I don't know. How do you feel? How do you feel about the Browns defense?
Yeah, I mean, the Browns, they have some injury concerns. I mean, they didn't have a lot up the middle, no matter what. And you would have thought that was going to be the big vulnerability, especially facing Lamar Jackson, who likes to throw the ball up the middle versus on the sidelines. But I mean, with the Browns had our number one rush grade for the week. So it seems like they had a really good game plan there, and it didn't matter. The one thing that you would wanted to have seen, although it's kind of this weird, it's kind of an oxymoron, like you kind of wanted to see them come from behind passing the ball. That would have been a little bit more interesting, I feel like. But then again, they would have had to play poorly to get into that position. So it's like one or the other. But that's the one thing you haven't seen from Jackson. But a couple of things I can point to that are, I think, solid takeaways that are leading into what we hope for this season is, one, Lamar Jackson, he threw it to his wide receivers a lot more with Hollywood Brown out there. It's about 58% of his targets were there versus 42 last year, which was second to last. Only Carson Wentz threw it to his wide receivers less than Jackson last year. So now he's more middle of the pack, which I think is good. And I think just the way that he was passing, it wasn't all play action sort of passes. He was sitting back there and kind of picking apart the defense at times, which I thought was impressive. So because of that, because it's a new wrinkle to that passing game, because he was really ineffective running, which I don't think we saw at all last year, maybe I'm buying it a little bit more because of those two solid points.
There's that play, the deep bomb to Hollywood Brown. Now I'll say this: I'm working a lot more off of dots than I normally would because there's some video issues going around. But like you can on the dots, you can see the sort of double move that Brown puts on. It looks like a cover three from the Browns, and they have and Brown's sort of the sort of middle receiver going deep. So you would think but then the second move sends him to the left third, and the corner who would have been there is already kept down. So just perfect. Like I'm sure, however, when they drew it up, like that's exactly what they were surely hoping for, and it worked. And that's nice. Yeah, that's nice. I mean, if you're selling, I guess the thing is like if the Browns, you said they're your number one rush grade, right?
Yeah.
Like run stop grade. So if it's got to be scary for opponents if that was their plan, sell out, stop the run, and then Jackson really picks you apart this way. And his completion over expectation was like plus 16, I think, this first week. So that's a good sign for the Ravens. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's this weird thing with Jackson, too, where he was a unanimous MVP last year. He put up similar efficiency numbers last year to what Patrick Mahomes did in 2018 in that season. Yet, if you talk about underrated versus overrated, if you look at quarterback rankings, sometimes he's third. I mean, he was first in the NFL player one, but we'll kind of ignore that one. But sometimes he could be fourth, fifth, sixth in some of these executive ratings. And it's weird because I had this Deshaun Watson versus Lamar Jackson thing in the offseason where first I was saying Watson, but then I realized, why are we doing this? Like Lamar Jackson is great. Like he probably is the better guy. And I just think people need to start buying, eventually we're going to see more capitulation. This was kind of like step one to getting more people capitulating the fact of maybe he's like right there with someone like Russell Wilson, quite honestly.
Yeah. 100%. I think that's like, to me, that's the debate. Like going forward, originally Jackson was the best quarterback last year. So
yes.
While I think if your ranking is projecting forward, putting him at number one, I wouldn't do it. But he was the best quarterback in the NFL regular season last year. So if that ranking was looking backwards, then I guess that's the case. To me, it's just Wilson versus Jackson. That's at for two. To put him at 4 or 5, I think is crazy because he's I think it really comes down to those two. Yeah, I think that's what I think.
All right. One other. Okay, now we got to go on the flip side. A little negative town here. Geriatric matchup, the old guy bowl over the weekend. Breeze, Brady, kind of ugly on both sides of the ball. Are you buying that either one is in decline, both are in decline? What's your thought?
I think I'm weirdly more worried about Breeze, because let me say this. Going into the season with Brady, my feeling was we've seen Brady his numbers have been on the decline, right? So we know he wasn't production-wise was not particularly good last season. But there's always a case like he was not in a great situation last year. I mean, like playmakers wise, he was really not dealing with much. The Patriots offensive line got a lot better as time went on last year, but they started out just awful in terms of pass protection. And so I've been wondering if this better situation was going to reveal that maybe Brady hadn't fallen off as much as we thought. And so I kind of am like holding that prior. I want to see a few weeks before I move off that. I think with Breeze, it's like he's in that his whole game, right, is being super accurate in the short game. And he was, -4 CPOE on short passes, short and behind the line of scrimmage, which is like, I think he was like a +5 last year overall, and I want to say higher off the top of my head when short passes. Don't hold me to that. That to me is like more concerning because like the whole thing is if he's going to do this one aspect really well, you have to do it really well in order for it to work. So that almost to me is more more alarming. The Bucs, I'm not smart enough X's and O's wise to know if this made a difference. One thing I looked at with our coverage numbers, I would look to just see who changed a lot from last year to this year. And the Bucs made a pretty heavy shift from some middle of field open coverages to middle of field close. They ran a lot more man one cover 3 than they did previously. I honestly don't know if that's if that was just different than what Breeze was expecting or threw him off, or if that could have affected Michael Thomas in a way. Again, it's just not my area of expertise to know, but I just noticed that difference from the Bucs. I don't know. Are you with me on Breeze? And is that worrying to you or no?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worrying, although I think I may go the other direction as far as who I'm more worried about. I mean, so for Brady, we do have a season, maybe a season and a half of already. There's evidence of decline. There's physically evidence decline of Drew Brees for a while. Who knows? Maybe sloping for many years. But 2018 he was maybe even leading the MVP race over Patrick Mahomes with a few games left to go in the season. 2019, despite the fact that they're not throwing as much, he was highly efficient. He graded well. So yeah, he had a bad game, but because I looked through some of his numbers, and Mahomes has this thing where he never has a bad game, which makes him pretty unique. But I was looking through some of Breeze's numbers in that 2018 season. I mean, he had to use your guys' QBR. He had a 17.9 in one game down the stretch there. He had a 24.5 in another. He had under 50 in another one there. Like I said, Mahomes is never under 50. In 2019, he has a game that's a 17.6. So he throws up some stinkers sometimes. And I also think there's an outside chance that 5 weeks from now, 10 weeks from now, we're looking back in this week 1 matchup and we're saying that was like 2 top 5 NFL defenses that were facing off against each other. So that's the one thing. This is not like the optics of Bucs Saints in the dome maybe doesn't really align with what our expectations should have been.
Yeah, I think, and like it's probably a little unfair because like part of in my head thinking about the Brady thing was like, well, Saints defense pretty solid, so let's see. And I didn't necessarily afford Breeze the same luxury, I guess, like right there. So maybe there's some bias creeping in. I did ask. I was trying to figure out like what the heck happened with Thomas, and so I asked like Ben Solak from the Draft Network like an hour ago about the cover 3 man 1 thing, and he said he'd have to watch the tape. But the other thing he said, which I think is a fair point, is like, it also could just be that like Carlton Davis and Sean Murphy Bunting are just really good players, and I buy that. I mean, those guys really, I think, were good last year and could really show themselves to be a force in 2020.
Yeah. I mean, Brees has, I'm sorry, Brady has the weapons this year. Mike Evans, how hurt he was or not, I guess is something we'll see going forward. But a couple other just small data points with them. They're not running play action as much. They take about as much time to throw, but they don't run play action as much. Brady's time to throw actually had been going up a little bit as they've been using a lot more play action in New England. So, that Arians system, I think there also were questions there. How good of a fit it'll be. Our small sample is maybe not so good. 2 interceptions, which is for him. He only throws fewer than he throws 8 interceptions during a year. It's kind of like a bad year for him. So again, we'll see exactly what's going on there.
I'm curious. Okay, I want to see a few weeks in what if the route distribution is changing. Under Arians here, because they were super. I mean, everyone knows, right? They're super vertical, but I think even like. I took a quick look at the offseason, like who runs, not just targeted routes, but like routes run. And I think Tampa verticals were like the most over average group type. Or don't quote me on that, but it was something along those lines, just indicating that. And I just wonder if they changed that. Mike Evans also not 100% healthy in that game too.
Yeah. I mean, his average depth of target was up to 9 from 7.9 the year before. But like I mentioned, the year before that they were juicing. They were juicing that a lot by doing so much play action. So yeah, we'll interesting to see how that continues to unfold going forward. Okay, let's pivot into talking about why Aaron Donald is bad. So let me just give a little overview here. So this is all based upon the chips, the player movement, that you have there, the location, the tracking for the players. So last year or 2 years ago, you guys came out with the pass rush stuff.
2 years ago.
Yeah, so you had the pass rush win rate for the pass rushers, pass block win rate. This is now run stop win rate for the defenders, run block win rate for the offensive guys. Maybe talk a little bit about the methodology without getting too many of the nuts and bolts, because I'm sure that'll come up as we're talking. And then is there anything that kind of differentiates those two, making one more difficult than the other to measure, the pass rush versus the run stopping?
Yeah, so I'll answer the last part first, which is it is definitely more difficult, and that's the reason why this running game metrics are coming out 2 full years after the pass game metrics. So Brian Burke, who created all these metrics, this has been something he's been talking about, working on, thinking about for a long time. He did the pass game ones because they're way more simple. It's really quite easy to identify who's blocking whom with the player tracking chips. And then once you have that information, it's also pretty easy to tell who's beating whom, because like in general, the idea is if you're blocking someone, you're trying to make sure you're in between them and the quarterback. The run game is just like way more complicated. So the model has to be different. It's not just about where are you versus another person. So the basic way this works is if we think about it from the run stop perspective, there are sort of 4 categories of ways that a player can get a run stop win. So the first way is kind of the most obvious, which is when you, and the most like pass block win rate, which is when you sort of beat your man such that you're in a better position to make a play on the runner. So, you get off your block and you're moving towards the runner. That's a win. That's by far the way that the players get wins the most. The second is what we call a disruption win. So you might still be being blocked, but you think about a guy who just pushes a guard or the center like back into the backfield, and it disrupts the play. That even if he's still being blocked, that player's having an effect. So that's a run stop win. The third is the least common, mostly for edges. It's like a contain rush. So you can still be being blocked, but you force contain such that the runner has to adjust his path, right? He can't get around. He has to cut back inside because of the contain. And then the fourth is the most simple, which is if you make a tackle within 3 yards of the line of scrimmage. So if any of those things or multiple of those things is a run stop win, anything else is a run stop loss. And then for the blockers, it's just the exact inverse of that.
Okay, so the questions that are going to come up initially for people. Number one, what about double teams, things like that? How are we judging guys there? What adjustments are made for that? Because that seems like the obvious one where it's difficult to credit a win or a loss because of the inequity of the force just being applied from both sides.
Yeah, 100%. We don't adjust for double teams, but we do record them. So we could do a double team adjusted metric, and we've talked about that for doing it for the pass plays as well. Try and keep things as simple as possible so that they get more widely used. But like, if you follow me on Twitter, a lot of times with the pass blocking numbers, what I'll do is, our pass rushing numbers, is I'll plot just your win rate and your double team rate against each other, so you can kind of make that inference against each other. Some players, you have, two players who have the same win rate, but one might be double teamed 10% of the time more. Well, that's not insignificant. Double teams, at least I don't have as much of the data on the run game, but like in the pass game, like, this is obvious, but like, double teams work. It's way harder to beat to get a win when you're double teamed. So yeah, you get double teamed in the run game, you have a way less likely chance. But we do record it. So we do, a lot of times we will put that context around the run block win rate, run stop win rate.
Right. Okay. Well, maybe we'll just get into some of the Aaron Donald talk here, because I was thinking about, we could probably talk about a lot of these concepts like double teams,
Sure.
for the fact that, these are, he's double teamed, and then you say, like, well, no, he's actually not double teamed that often. So things like that. So I think that's a good way of thinking about double teams, is you don't want, if you're going to try to bring that into the metric itself too much, then you're going to be building in so many assumptions that it makes it more difficult to even understand what's going on in the metric. Whereas if you don't bring it in and then you say, but Aaron Donald faces an equal amount of double teams as everyone else, then you're like, okay, well then I don't have to adjust for that. Like that happens a lot. I think if people try to build too much into a metric, it can get confusing. It's better if you know what you're looking at, essentially, what the number means you're looking at. So that's something for Donald. But let's talk about Donald overall. So the specific finding is that his win rate is average or slightly below average versus others, correct?
Versus other interior defenders, yeah.
Okay. And the additional context is that even some other measures like off the field and things like that don't show him to be a benefit. I mean, those can be noisy, of course, but it's almost, it's like, you're bolstering the point as opposed to. Mm-hmm. So there is evidence there too, right? That was one thing you had in your article.
I think it's a really important part. Let me give you a little backstory. We have a kind of real plus minus metric for college football that my colleague Paul Sabin works on, and that was our focus. But he started building an RPM model for the NFL, and we're hoping to get that out later this year. So that's been sort of a side project for him. And one of his first things that he found, he came and said, "So I've been working on this RPM model, and Aaron Donald is not good against the run." And I was like, "No, don't be stupid. Come on. Like, that's just ridiculous." Okay.
I like you're trying to spread the blame to other people.
No, I'm not trying to spread the blame. I'm trying to relate to the haters, okay? Because okay, all right. I was one. I was the people who don't believe this. I was that. Like, I was legitimately like, that is preposterous. Aaron Donald is amazing. Like, he's got all these blow up plays. It's just, it's got to be flawed. Like, you're too early in your process. And so anyway, that's been like kind of an ongoing sort of, joking debate that we've had. And then Brian came along and built this metric, which is not related to results, right? So it's all about, it's a process metric, and right, it's judging individual blocks and individual plays, and it came out saying Aaron Donald having an average win rate, and so that was, those two things together starts to really hammer home starts to really solidify a point, I think, and that is one of the things that gives me more confidence in the take, is that not just the win rate, but the on-off splits, which are not insignificant, like in terms of sample. Like, there's plenty of plays where he's not on the field. so the number was that their EPA per play allowed on run plays with Donald on the field versus off the field over the last 3 years is exactly the same. So I think that's important. Like you said, a lot of noise, but it reinforces the point.
Right. And okay, so a couple other things that I know from reading that I think are important is that Donald, he doesn't make many tackles. He's
Right.
near the bottom. So that's kind of your easiest way to get a win, probably is by getting it to one of the easiest way. But some guy could just run into you essentially,
Right.
and you can almost get a win that way.
And I think that's like, can I just say really too, like that's one of the things he's not average in terms of his tackle rate. He's well below average. And
right.
So the whole idea of the metric is not to rely on tackles, right? Like we want to capture run defenders and all the things they do that aren't tackles. Tackles is easy to capture. We already do that. And so if I were told without knowing anything else, Aaron Donald has a low tackle rate, my assumption might have been, well, he probably just does a lot of other stuff. And it turns out he does do other stuff. That's how he gets up to average.
Right. And then maybe the most important part, and our friends in film Twitter weren't buying some of the examples that Brian Burke had sent out there. Never post anything. That's all I gotta say. Never post clips. You're always wrong, no matter what on this one. But he posted some clips. The second one maybe wasn't the best one to post because Donald almost did make the tackle on that one. But anyway, he posted some clips that illustrated a point, and I'm buying this. I am in on this point that you have here, because this is one of these things that it's like a second order type of thing that I think is difficult for people to understand. It's that people watch the clip and basically the point of these clips was that Donald is shooting into his gap, which is normally the B gap on the outside of the guard. He is going for penetration because he's trying to sack the quarterback a lot of the time, or he can do something that other players can't do what he can do. So if he does make a play, it's a big play in the backfield. It's normally a highly negative play. But in doing that, he leaves open that this A gap is still there for either the linebacker to come in and fill, or a nose tackle if it's there to get over and get to. But now the A gap expands all the way from the A to the C gap essentially, and it becomes huge. So I think people are watching those clips and they're like, well, that's not his responsibility. Well, he just heaped this additional responsibility onto the shoulders of whoever was responsible for that A gap by the fact that he was so good in going around. So I mean, I'm definitely buying that. Do you think maybe you're back? But my only concern is, are you backing into a reasoning that's obviously not itself in the metric, but it's more watching film to try to figure out what's going on? So do you think that is the main thing that people don't understand, or are there other things?
I think partial yes. So I would say backing into the reasoning, the reason we came to that, the reason we looked for it in the first place was because we have this other metric called push, which is just how far vertically, like if you're facing the quarterback, each defender travels in the first 2 seconds. And Aaron Donald is number one. He gets the most push, which makes sense because he's got an amazing jump. Next Gen Stats has an average pass rush get off jump, so the passing equivalent, Aaron Donald's number one. Dude's got great jumps. The question was, normally that's a good thing. Getting more push is good. Why is it that this was like the whole question was I'm sitting there looking at these numbers trying to reconcile how is it that he gets great push and has an average win rate? Those two things doesn't quite add up. And so when we went through and watched the plays, and I agree, if we could do one thing better, we could have had our lined up our long list of plays. Brian would say, he was rushing. He just wanted to get some stuff out there.
He was going toe to toe. He was going toe to toe with Phil Twitter. They appreciate when you say that also. But go ahead.
So we found cases where a bunch of cases where he was doing that. He's prioritizing the quarterback. I'm going to come back to that point. It's not the only thing. Like there's also a lot of plays where he's just like normal run plays where it's just like he just doesn't do anything, and that happens to everybody. I'm not picking on Aaron Donald. I'm just saying he can be beat in a normal way, and so I think that's important. The other thing I'll say is it's a good, I'm 100% fine strategy, right? Like go for the quarterback, gamble, it's a pass. Like do everything you can to stop the opponent's passing attack with your best, with like the league's best pass rusher. And like it all that, and by the way, like I think Aaron Donald is the best defensive player in the NFL. That's not mutually exclusive from being an average run defender. All those things can be true, but our previous conception of Donald was always amazing at everything. And who knows, maybe if he like set out to be amazing, he probably would be. But like strategy wise, it seems like a lot of the times he prioritizes the quarterback, and that's fine. It just makes him, in this case, just an average run defender in terms of salary.
Right. I mean, I guess how I would frame it is you're not saying he's not playing optimally in the context of the entire defense or what you want to do defensively. Like he's not playing optimally to stop the run, but he's probably playing optimally to stop the offense.
Exactly. I think that's a really good play. Yeah, I think that's right.
And then one other thing, though, I think I don't know how. I'm trying to think of what the analogy is on offense. When I mentioned the sack thing earlier, and I think it could be another thing here on defense where it's a play that you wouldn't ding someone for coming in like that and making a play. But then again, you're actually giving up a much more valuable run on the other end. And this is a negative play too, right? This is on average negative play that you're kind of giving them a freebie. You're kind of giving them a potential 7-8 yard gain where you should have just been happy that they were running the ball. So you don't have to do anything special for that to be a negative for the offense. But what you're allowing them to do, what he does with some of these plays is you wouldn't credit it against them. You wouldn't from a grading perspective. Also, like a potential hole in our grading is we're going to say, oh, he just blew right by that guy. But I mean, the run play wasn't to him, but it's not his fault, right? Like he can't be everywhere at the same time. And you're just not noticing the fact that you're kind of opening up a win for the offense, essentially on that play, a success for the offense on that play where it wouldn't have existed if you just stood and didn't move, basically.
Yeah, I think that makes sense the way you just described it. And I think that's right. I mean, I watched the game the other night and with a close eye on Donald, right? I knew if he had a big blow-up tackle for loss, I was going to hear about it. And I thought it was pretty indicative of what we were talking about. I mean, he had a couple nice plays in the run. I'm talking just his 18 run plays. He had a couple nice plays where he made a stop or did something to affect the run game. Had a couple nice plays. Had a bunch of plays where he did just nothing, and he had a couple plays where he shot the gap and it opened up a hole. So, yeah, I think like or even like if you look at the first running play of that game, it's like it's not even like by the time he gets by his defender, it's not even like it could be a pass play. Like at that point, it's fully a run play, but he's just going towards his assigned gap, which is fine, but it also left that's not going to make any sense without anyone seeing the play. So let's just ignore that. But like, I guess, yeah, I think if anyone goes and watches that game, like it was a solid game. Like I looked at his run stop win rate was better than what it normally was. It was the best among the Rams defenders, I think. But oh no, I guess I'm not sure about that. But it was better than average, better than what it normally was. But I think pretty indicative of what we're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how this metric plays out as the season goes on. I know, a lot of people have quoted some of the pass metrics last year. So I think it's another thing to bring into the equation along with, PFF grades, along with the eye test, along with everything else. Brian, I think posted a clip with the dots that did show the phenomenon. Maybe stick to dots from now on if you're going to post, because when you see Aaron Donald in the flesh, you can't pay attention to anything else. So
I know it's true. I'm curious, how do you so one counter argument, right? Like, and I think it's important. There was a lot of like what would you call it? Negative buzz around the story, right? People were mad. One does not insult Aaron Donald. But I always think, and there were a lot of silly criticisms, right? Like I got a lot of people sending me past plays of him dominating, which is not the point. A lot of people saying tackle for loss numbers that include sacks. It's like, well, yeah, if you include sacks, that his numbers will be pretty high. The question that I'm trying to figure out is like, my point is that, but like, I think it's like, just because you have those criticisms, I think it's important to still listen to like the legitimate critiques, because I think there were some fair ones. The question becomes for Donald is like, Nate Tice had a good tweet where, he talked about, is he like a low average, high slugging kind of guy?
Mm-hmm.
And so the question becomes, is he a low average guy, but he makes a lot of explosive plays? And like, I think the answer is yes, but like to what degree? I'm talking strictly run game, right? So sometimes he shoots his gap and he just runs into the running back and it's like a -4. And he has those highlight plays. Like we've all seen those highlight plays. But it's not the thing that I was thinking about was like, but his numbers are not crazy high in that regard. Like Next Gen Stats has a just simple stuffs and stuff rate, which is just tackle for loss or tackle for no gain in the run game only. And like his stuff rate last year was like 30th, I think, which is above average, but it's not like is that a million home runs? Like, and how many, is he? I don't know, but like that's the thing that it didn't make me think, well, he's just literally, he's literally like off the charts in terms of these incredible run stop plays. I think he has more than average of those. I just don't know if is he the best at those? I don't know. Do you guys have like him with the most like highest graded plays or on the run game or anything like that?
I don't think so. I mean, we have some stuff about penetration and whatnot. I mean, I think it just depends on your perspective. I think from a lot of people when they're watching, and this is the way you're taught, probably in a lot of, if you're a football player, is, your job is to do your job, Bill Belichick style. Your job is that gap. If the runner's not going through that gap and you haven't let them go through that gap, then you did your job. And Aaron Donald does his job. The problem is, it in a larger sense, it has an effect on the defense. So I think maybe that's kind of it. Like they just can't find fault in that. And then it ends up becoming, this bigger thing. But one thing I wanted to ask though, as you as being the one who writes the article on this, now I'm very anti like tone policing on these things where people say, you're arrogant because you're saying this or that. What do you think about when you're framing this as saying, number one, he's an average run defender, as opposed to, it's not going to be too catchy of a title if you're like, Aaron Donald has a average, pass stop win rate. I mean, maybe that would be good, but I don't know. He's an average run defender versus, maybe he could be he has traits where he could be a great run defender, as we talked about earlier. And number two, the prove it part on the title. I don't know if this is something that you were writing or not, but I think also, I could see how people that may be a little bit more inflammatory. So what do you think about the framing aspect of it? Where generally I'm on your side. I'm just wondering the specific instance, if you think you should worry about that or in the grand scheme of things, it's not a big deal.
So fair question. I do think it matters. I think the strongest thing I said in the body of the text was Aaron Donald is an average run defender, as opposed to Aaron Donald is average and run stop win rate, which you're right is not going to be the catchiest title. No one's ever heard of run stop win rate before our stories came out. But the reason why I felt convicted enough to say he's an average run defender, number one, we could hypothesize that like if he prioritized the run, he'd be a good run defender, but like that's not how we quantify any other player at anything, right?
Right.
And then number two, it was the supporting metrics that backed me up. If we didn't have the plus minus, if we didn't have the on-off splits, I don't think I would have felt convicted enough to say that. But when you have evidence from sort of different angles, there's nothing really inherently in run stop win rate like that relates it to EPA, and there's nothing in EPA that really relates it to run stop win rate. Tackles at the line of scrimmage or something like as an aside, but they're both coming to the same conclusion tells me, okay, well, what's the evidence against? The things I think about would be PFF grade, right? So he's always a really highly graded run defender. And then just our general perception of his highlights. But we can sort of seemingly explain that. And ultimately, one of the things that we know about ourselves is we're not good at cataloging every single Aaron Donald play. We can only think about so many. So we think about the highlights and we do think he has an above average number of highlights. But if we look at it on a rate basis, seems average. If he was hitting a ton of home runs, that would probably show up in EPA in terms of on-off splits. And so I did think about it for quite a while, and I don't know, it might have been the wrong call to just say he's average, but to me, that's where the evidence points.
Yeah, no, I'm if you're worried about how your analysis is going to be framed in this kind of bad faith sort of argument on the other side and straw man sort of argument, then you can't do anything. Then you can't do anything. So no, I agree. I agree with you there. Although I'll tell you a short little anecdote. I saw something funny last night from Benjamin Albright. I'm not sure if you follow him. He's a good guy, so I don't mean to say anything about him here. But he was saying that the Broncos shouldn't have gone for it. Did they go for it? Or I don't know if it was Tennessee or the Broncos. It was one of them about going for it on 4th and 1 last night. And he's like, that's why you don't do it. And someone said, well, that's what the numbers tell you. He's like, yeah, well, the numbers also tell you Aaron Donald is a bad rusher fan. So just so you know, this is gonna be like the pushback to every sort of thing there. But this is all part of the process. And I'll say that I'm very happy about what you guys are doing there. I think it's excellent stuff. And, put it out there. Let people talk about it. Let's try it. Let's try and figure it out. And I think that's the best thing. And creating a discourse around this is definitely what you guys have done. So I thank you for that. And I thank you for taking the bullets for us also. Because now I can start. I think it's cooled down. I think I could start dipping in to defending you guys. But day one, I was not getting involved in that.
Thanks. Well, yeah, no, it has cooled down. And genuinely, we want to have the conversation. We're open to hearing. I don't think I pretend to be some sort of run game expert. And so, we want to hear, arguments against and have that conversation because, I don't think it's a take I'd heard before, and we were certainly surprised. And by the way, it would have been a heck of a lot easier if it just said Aaron Donald was the best run defender. I mean, believe me, it really would have sold it. Okay, great. Aaron Donald, number one, cool. But this is, I think ultimately it's important that you really follow what the data is telling you. And so that's what we did. And we do actually genuinely want to have the conversation. I do think it's interesting.
Well, I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate you being here today. Maybe you can come back when you invent a new metric that says Aaron Donald's good to deflect against this one, against this metric. Well, I guess you already have the pass rush.
Maybe next time we can take down Mahomes or something,
Yeah, that's good. So someone people have questions about. So let me just let everyone know, follow Seth on Twitter at Seth Walder, ESPN analytics writer. Such good stuff going on. I love all your stuff. I probably quote it too often for my boss's liking, quite honestly, QBR and all that stuff. But I've been a diehard fan for what you guys do forever. So I thank you for being on here. And to everyone listening, I'll be talking at you guys next week. Thanks.
You want to get rid of me and get back to more great PFF YouTube content? All you have to do is push that button right there and subscribe. Thanks for watching.